The impossible happened. An alien war clan crossed half the galaxy to guard a single human's home. They say he earned it through a choice no warrior could understand, a kindness that rewrote their oldest law. And if one act of mercy can summon an army, what does it say about the power humanity still refuses to believe it has? Tell me where you're watching from, and subscribe to help this universe grow. Now, the story begins. The drone made a grinding sound that meant Ethan would need parts he didn't have. He set down his tools and wiped grease-stained hands on his pants, looking out at the crimson forest that surrounded his cabin. The trees here grew in impossible spirals, their bark the color of dried blood under Kovrin III's pale sun. He'd been on this planet for 3 years. 3 years of silence, broken only by the wind through alien trees and the occasional supply shuttle that never stayed long enough for conversation. That's how he wanted it. Some men hide from war. He was hiding from what he'd become in it. The photo lay face down on his workbench where he'd left it that morning. He didn't need to look at it to remember the faces. 32 soldiers under his command at Tanner. 18 came home. The math never stopped adding itself up in his head, especially in the quiet hours before dawn. Ethan heated water for coffee, the bitter kind that reminded him he was still alive even when he didn't want to be. Outside, the forest was doing something strange. The smaller creatures that usually chattered in the undergrowth had gone silent. That happened sometimes before the storms rolled in, but the sky was clear. Then he heard it, a sound that didn't belong to this world or any natural thing. The sharp crack of energy weapons cutting through air, followed by voices shouting in a language he didn't recognize. Then another sound he did recognize, something that made his hands move before his brain caught up. Someone screaming. Ethan grabbed his rifle from above the door. It was old, chemical propellant, the kind that corporations had stopped manufacturing 20 years ago. But it worked, and it was quiet. And right now, those were the only things that mattered. He moved into the forest, following the sounds of pursuit. His training came back like muscle memory he couldn't forget no matter how hard he tried. Stay low. Use cover. Don't think about who you're about to kill. Just think about who you're trying to save. The screaming had stopped. That was worse than the noise. Ethan pushed through a thicket of spiral trees and froze. 3 humans in corporate security gear were standing in a clearing, weapons trained on something he couldn't quite see. One of them was laughing. The sound made Ethan's stomach turn. "Nowhere left to run, savage," one of them said. "Boss wants you alive, but he didn't say in how many pieces." Then Ethan saw her. She was dragging herself across the forest floor, leaving a trail of blood that shimmered with an opalescent sheen he'd never seen before. She was humanoid, but clearly not human. Her skin had a bronze tone with metallic undertones that caught the light. Tribal markings covered her arms, glowing faintly with bioluminescence. Her eyes were amber and sharp, even through obvious pain. She looked up at her pursuers with defiance that reminded Ethan of soldiers who knew they were about to die but refused to beg. Something in his chest cracked open. Not the careful, controlled thing he'd built over 3 years of isolation. Something older. Something he thought he'd left behind on Tanner. The first mercenary never saw Ethan coming. Neither did the second. The third managed to turn before Ethan's rifle spoke, but not fast enough. When the clearing went silent, only 2 beings were left standing. Ethan lowered his weapon and approached slowly. The alien woman had managed to prop herself against a tree, one hand pressed against a wound in her side. She was watching him with those amber eyes, calculating whether he was a different kind of threat. "Easy," Ethan said, holding up one hand. "I'm not going to hurt you." She said something in a language that sounded like wind through broken glass. Then her hand moved to a device on her wrist, and when she spoke again, a translator rendered her words. Why? It was the simplest question in the universe. Why had he saved her? Why risk himself for a stranger? Why care about someone who wasn't even his species? Ethan didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he had too many, none of them simple enough to explain. So he told her the only truth that mattered. Because nobody deserves to die afraid. Her eyes widened slightly. Then she pitched forward, and Ethan barely caught her before she hit the ground. Her blood was warm against his hands, and he realized with growing horror that he had no idea how to treat injuries for her species. But he'd figure it out. He always did. He lifted her carefully and started back toward his cabin, leaving the bodies of his own kind behind in the crimson forest. Somewhere in the distance, more lights flickered through the trees. More hunters coming. Ethan walked faster, this wounded stranger in his arms, and wondered what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. Ethan's medical supplies were designed for humans, which meant they were mostly useless. He worked by instinct and hope, cleaning the wound with antiseptic that might kill her faster than help her, wrapping bandages that might be toxic to her biology. Her breathing was shallow but steady. That had to mean something. She woke on the second day, fast and violent. One moment Ethan was checking her bandages, the next he was on his back with a knife at his throat. She was weak, swaying on her feet, but her eyes were sharp and murderous. "Easy," Ethan said, not moving. "You're safe here." She said something harsh in her language, then remembered the translator. "You killed your own kind for me. Why would you do that?" "They were trying to kill you." "Many beings try to kill many other beings. This does not make warriors betray their tribe." Ethan met her gaze. "They stopped being my tribe the moment they started hunting wounded people for sport." Something in her expression shifted. Not trust exactly, more like confused curiosity. She lowered the knife but didn't sheath it. Her free hand touched the bandages at her side, feeling the amateur medical work. "You have treated me. I tried. I'm not a doctor and I've never worked on anyone who wasn't human. You should have let me die. It would have been simpler." "Probably," Ethan agreed. "I'm not good at simple." She almost smiled. Then her legs gave out, and Ethan caught her before she fell. This time she didn't fight him. He helped her back to the cot he'd set up near the fireplace. She watched him with those amber eyes that seemed to see through everything. "What is your name, human?" "Ethan Cole." He waited for recognition, for anger, for something. Her face remained impassive. "I am Sarah Na, of the Sky Explorer lineage." She paused, then added something that made the translator hesitate before rendering it. "I was sent to find you." Ethan felt cold wash through him. "Find me." Ethan Cole, former officer of the colonial force, court-martialed for disobeying direct orders during the Tanner campaign, exiled to remote worlds, considered dangerous. She tilted her head. "Your file says many things about you. None of them mention that you make terrible coffee." Despite everything, Ethan laughed. It was a rough sound, unused for too long. "You're drinking my coffee and insulting it? You're definitely feeling better." "It tastes like burned dirt. It's an acquired taste. I do not wish to acquire it." But she took another sip anyway, watching him over the rim of the cup. "Why did you save those civilians at Tannar?" The question hit him like a physical blow. "How do you know about that?" "It is why I was sent. To evaluate if you are the threat your people believe you are." She set down the cup. "You disobeyed orders to bombard a civilian settlement. You landed your soldiers to evacuate them instead. Half your unit died. You were branded traitor." "They weren't enemy combatants," Ethan said quietly. "They were families, children. The war was supposed to be over. And yet you were punished for showing mercy. I was punished for getting my people killed." The old guilt rose up, familiar and suffocating. "I chose strangers over my own soldiers. Maybe they were right to exile me." Serena was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She took his hand and pressed it against the bandages at her side. "You chose life over orders," she said. "You chose a wounded stranger over your own safety. You are not dangerous, Ethan Cole. You are foolishly, impossibly kind. This terrifies your people because they do not understand it." Before he could respond, she pulled a small blade from her belt. Ethan tensed, but she turned it on herself, drawing a thin line across her palm. Blood welled up, that strange opalescent color. She pressed her bleeding hand against his forearm. "What are you doing?" She spoke words in her language, ceremonial and ancient-sounding. The translator rendered them, "By blood shared in sanctuary, by life given freely, I mark you as guardian and companion. What is mine is yours. What threatens you threatens my people." The blood on his arm began to glow, forming symbols that seemed to sink into his skin. He tried to pull away, but she held firm. "This is the right of blood protection," she said. "You saved me in sacred forest. By my people's oldest law, you are now bound to my clan. They will come for you, Ethan Cole. And when they do, you will understand what you have truly done." The marks on his arm pulsed once, then faded to faint silvery scars. Ethan stared at them, then at her. "I didn't ask for this." "Neither did I ask to be saved." She lay back down, suddenly exhausted. "Yet here we are, bound by choices we made in moments of crisis. My people say the universe has a sense of humor. I am beginning to believe them." Outside, the forest had gone quiet again. Ethan looked at the marks on his arm and wondered how many more people he was going to have to save before his past stopped chasing him. Or if maybe, just this once, it wasn't his past that was coming. Maybe it was something else entirely. 3 days passed in strange domesticity. Sirana healed faster than any human could, her people's biology knitting wounds that should have taken weeks. She moved around the cabin with growing confidence, studying everything with warrior's eyes that missed nothing. "Your dwelling is small," she observed, not unkindly. "It's enough for one person. Now it holds 2. Ethan smiled despite himself. "I've noticed." She had opinions about everything. His food was too bland. His water was too cold. His furniture was poorly designed for anything other than humans. But she ate what he offered, drank what he poured, and sat where he indicated. And sometimes, late at night by the fire, she would tell him stories of her people. The Aelthera were warriors, yes, but they were also explorers, philosophers, artists. They had survived the collapse of 3 civilizations and rebuilt each time stronger than before. Honor was their foundation, but it was a living thing, adapting to each new challenge. "We were not always fierce," she said one evening. "Once, we were prey, hunted by creatures that saw us as food. We learned that survival requires more than strength. It requires the willingness to remember who you are, even when the universe tries to make you into something else." Ethan understood that better than he wanted to admit. On the 4th day, Sirana tried to teach him a basic Aelthera greeting. It involved hand gestures that seemed simple until he attempted them, at which point they became impossibly complex. "No, no," she said, trying not to laugh. "You move like you are swatting insects." "Maybe I am. Your gestures look like insect swatting to me." This is why humans are so difficult to communicate with. You see violence in everything, says the warrior who held a knife to my throat. That was different. That was professional. But she was smiling now, and Ethan realized it was the first time he'd seen her smile. It transformed her face from fierce to something softer, something that made his chest ache in ways he'd forgotten. The moment broke when his perimeter alarm chirped. Ethan was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Sirana moved to his side, her own blade drawn. "How many?" she asked. Ethan checked the readout. 3 contacts, moving fast, same energy signatures as before. "The hunters have returned." Her voice was grim. "They will not stop. The artifact they seek is too valuable." "What artifact?" She hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "Beneath this valley lies something ancient, a doorway to places your people have forgotten. Corporations would kill thousands to possess it. My mission was to find it first, secure it, and to determine if the human living above it was threat or ally." "And?" Ethan asked. What's your determination? Serana met his eyes. That you are the most dangerous kind of person, one who will do what is right regardless of cost. This makes you unpredictable. This makes you valuable. This makes you someone worth protecting. The alarm intensified. The contacts were moving into attack formation. Ethan did quick calculations. His cabin had good cover but limited ammunition. Against 3 trained mercenaries with energy weapons, his chances were poor. "We should run," he said. "No." Serana's voice was firm. "We stand. We fight. You protected me once. Now we protect each other. This is what the blood marks mean, Ethan Cole. We are clan now, whether you asked for it or not." Ethan looked at the marks on his arm, still faintly glowing in the dim light. He'd spent 3 years hiding from the man he'd been. Maybe it was time to remember why he'd been that man in the first place. "All right," he said, "then we make them regret coming back." Serana's grin was fierce and wild. "Now you speak like Aelthara." Outside, the forest began to burn. The hunters had learned from their first encounter. This time, they weren't taking chances. This time, it was war. The attack came at dawn. Plasma bolts turned the morning mist into steam, and the cabin's eastern wall exploded inward in a shower of splinters. Ethan rolled, came up firing, and sent the first mercenary stumbling back with a round through his shoulder. "Left flank!" Serana shouted, already moving. She was a blur of motion, her blade catching light as she vaulted through the broken wall. Ethan heard a scream, cut short. The second mercenary tried to flank him. Ethan triggered the trap he'd spent the previous night setting up. The old mining charges he'd salvaged months ago weren't sophisticated, but they were loud. The explosion sent the mercenary flying backward into a spiral tree. He didn't get up. "2 down," Ethan called out. "Third is running." Serana appeared beside him, blood on her blade, not her blood. "Shall we pursue?" "No, let him go. Let him tell his employers what happens when they come hunting." Serana tilted her head, studying him. "You would show mercy to those who showed you none?" "I would show them that not everyone solves problems with more violence." Ethan lowered his rifle. "Sometimes the threat of what you could do is more effective than actually doing it." Interesting philosophy for a soldier. Former soldier. I'm trying to be something different now. Oui. The words hung between them, and Ethan realized he meant them. He was trying. Maybe that had to be enough. They spent the next hour putting out fires and salvaging what they could from the cabin. Most of it was destroyed, but Ethan found his photo, somehow untouched in the rubble. He stared at the faces of his lost soldiers, then carefully tucked it into his pocket. "They were your clan," Serana said quietly. "They were." Ethan's throat felt tight. "I got them killed because I thought I knew better than my commanders, because I thought saving strangers was worth sacrificing my own people." Was it? The question was simple and devastating. Ethan had spent 3 years trying to answer it. He still didn't know. "Those civilians you saved at Tanner," Serana continued. "Did you know they were Aelthara?" Ethan's head snapped up. "What? Your file did not mention it. Perhaps your people did not know, but the settlement you evacuated was a hidden colony of my people, refugees from a war you knew nothing about. You saved 412 Aelthara lives that day, Ethan Cole, including my sister's daughter." The world seemed to tilt. "I didn't know. Does it matter? You saw people in danger and you acted. This is why I was sent to find you, not to evaluate a threat, to find the human who valued life over orders, to determine if you were worthy of what my people owe you." Before Ethan could respond, pain exploded in his side. He looked down, confused, and saw blood spreading across his shirt. The third mercenary hadn't run. He'd circled back, taken a shot from long range. Ethan's legs gave out. Serana caught him, lowered him gently. Her face was fury and fear. "Stay with me," she commanded. "Not really planning on leaving," Ethan managed. The pain was enormous, but distant. Shock, probably. That was bad. Serana pulled out her communication device. The one she'd told him was damaged. She pressed it to her wrist and spoke rapidly in her language. Lights flickered across the device, responding. "What are you doing?" Ethan asked. "Calling my people, activating the emergency protocol." She looked at him, and her eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "You saved me. You saved my niece without knowing. You fight beside me like clan. The debt my people owe you is beyond measuring." "I didn't do it for debt." "I know." She pressed her hand against his wound, trying to slow the bleeding. "That is why you are worth saving. Hold on, Ethan Cole. Hold on, and I will show you what it means when the Aelthera honor their promises." The sky above them began to hum with incoming ships. But Ethan's vision was narrowing, darkness creeping in at the edges. The last thing he saw was Serena's face above him, fierce and determined. The last thing he heard was her voice, speaking words he didn't understand but somehow knew were meant to keep him alive. Then the darkness took him, and he fell into dreams of fire and salvation. Ethan woke to the sound of 100 engines. His side ached, but the pain was manageable. Wrapped in bandages that smelled of herbs he didn't recognize, he was in what remained of his cabin, though someone had jury-rigged a medical tent over his makeshift bed. Serena sat beside him, and she wasn't alone. 3 other Aelthera warriors stood at attention nearby, their armor gleaming even in the dim light. When they saw him wake, they placed fists over their hearts in what was clearly a salute. "What's happening?" Ethan asked. "You are alive. That is what matters." Serena helped him sit up. "My people came, faster than I expected. The emergency protocol I activated, it carries special weight." "How long was I out?" 2 days. Your wound was grave, but our healers are skilled." She paused. "There is something you must know, something I did not tell you about the blood mark I gave you." Ethan looked at his arm. The silvery scars seemed to pulse with faint light. "I'm guessing it's more than just a thank you?" "The right of blood protection is our oldest tradition. It has not been invoked in over a century. When a warrior is saved in sacred forest, when blood is shared willingly, the one who saves becomes guardian of the entire clan." She met his eyes. "You are not just bound to me, Ethan Cole. You are bound to all Aelthera, and we to you. That seems like something you should have mentioned before cutting your hand open." "Would you have refused?" Ethan thought about it. Even knowing what it meant, even understanding the weight of it, would he have done things differently? He'd saved her because it was right, not because he wanted something in return. "No," he admitted, "I still would have helped you." Serena smiled, sad and warm. "This is why you are dangerous. You make choices that change worlds without considering the cost to yourself." Outside, the sound of engines grew louder. Serena stood, offered him her hand. "Come. There is someone you must meet, someone who needs to see the human who saved her blood." Ethan let her help him up. His legs were shaky but held. Together, they walked out of the tent into morning light that seemed too bright, too full of impossible things. The valley was filled with ships, dozens of them, sleek and fierce, bearing markings he didn't recognize, and standing in formation around his destroyed cabin were warriors. So many warriors, all Aelthera, all armored, all watching him with expressions he couldn't read. At their head stood a woman who could only be royalty. Her armor was more elaborate than the others, etched with symbols that seemed to shift in the light. She was older than Serena, with the same amber eyes but lined with experience and authority. Serena bowed deeply. Ethan, not knowing what else to do, tried to copy the gesture and probably looked ridiculous doing it. The matriarch spoke, and every translator in the valley rendered her words simultaneously. "Ethan Cole of humanity, you saved my daughter from hunters. You sheltered her in your home. You fought beside her against your own kind, and in doing so you activated an oath we have carried for 5 generations. "I don't understand," Ethan said. "At Tannar you saved 412 Aelthera. Among them was my granddaughter, barely 2 cycles old. She lives now because you chose mercy over orders. We have searched for you ever since to repay this debt. And then you saved Serena, my heir, and invoked the oldest law we possess." The matriarch stepped forward. Ethan tensed, unsure what was coming. She placed both hands on his shoulders, looked him in the eyes. "You did not save a warrior, Ethan Cole. You saved our future. You reminded us that honor without compassion is merely violence with ceremony." She turned to address the assembled warriors. "This human has shown us what we have forgotten in our centuries of war, that the strongest choice is not always the killing blow. Sometimes it is the extended hand." Then she did something that made Ethan's breath catch. She knelt before him, one fist over her heart. And behind her, every single warrior in the valley did the same. Hundreds of Ael Thara, feared throughout the sector, kneeling before an exiled human soldier in the ruins of his cabin. "Rise," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "Please, I don't deserve this." "Deserve?" The matriarch stood, and her smile was fierce. "Worthiness is not given, Guardian. It is proven, and you have proven yours with blood and choice." She raised her voice. "From this day forward, Ethan Cole is Ishvar, the bringer of warmth. He is clan. He is protected, and any who threaten him threaten all Aelthera." The warriors struck their fists against their chests in unison. The sound was like thunder. Ethan looked at Serena, lost. She stepped to his side, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Welcome to the clan," she said softly. "Try not to look so terrified. It ruins the moment." Despite everything, Ethan laughed. It was that, or cry, and he'd done enough of that over the past 3 years. Maybe it was time for something different. Maybe it was time to accept that he wasn't meant to hide from what he was. Maybe he was meant to be exactly this. Foolishly, impossibly kind, and for once in his life, rewarded for it rather than punished. The sky above was full of ships, and his valley was full of warriors who had sworn to protect him. Ethan Cole, who had spent 3 years alone, was alone no longer. For better or worse, he belonged somewhere again. The next 3 days were chaos of the organized kind. Aelthera engineers rebuilt his cabin with materials he couldn't identify and technology he didn't understand. Warriors set up defensive positions throughout the valley, and Ethan found himself at the center of it all, somehow expected to coordinate with people whose culture he barely understood. "Your tactical assessment was correct," one of the warriors told him, pointing at a holographic map. "The ridge provides excellent cover for ambush." Ethan studied the terrain. "But if they come from the south, we'll be exposed. We need secondary positions here and here." The warrior, whose name was something Ethan kept mispronouncing, nodded with respect. "You think like Aelthera, multiple layers of defense, each supporting the others." "I think like someone who's been ambushed too many times," Ethan corrected, but he appreciated the compliment. Serena appeared beside him, carrying 2 cups of something that definitely wasn't coffee. "Drink? You have been working for 6 hours without rest." "I'm fine." "You are running on adrenaline and stubbornness. Drink." Ethan took the cup. The liquid inside was warm and tasted like honey mixed with starlight. "This is actually good. Do not sound so surprised. We are capable of making pleasant things." She studied the map. "The corporate fleet will arrive soon. Intelligence suggests they are bringing enough firepower to level this valley. Why? For an artifact they don't even fully understand? Because it represents power, and humans crave power like my people crave honor." She paused. "Not all humans, but enough of them." The matriarch joined them, moving with a grace that made Ethan feel clumsy by comparison. "Ishvar, we have decoded more of the corporate communications. They believe the artifact can open pathways between distant stars. Instantaneous travel. It would change everything." "Can it?" Ethan asked. "Perhaps, but it is also a tomb. The civilization that built it died using it. We came to Kovran III to ensure no one repeated their mistake." Ethan looked at his cabin. now rebuilt and fortified beyond recognition. So we're not just fighting corporate greed. We're fighting to keep everyone in the galaxy from making a fatal mistake. Yes, and you, who did not ask for this responsibility, are now at the center of it. The matriarch placed a hand on his shoulder. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. That's the second time someone has told me that. Sarahna smiled. Perhaps you should start believing it. That night, after the planning sessions and weapon checks and endless preparations, Ethan found himself alone with Sarahna by a fire. The other warriors had given them space, whether out of respect or courtesy, or some cultural thing he didn't understand. "Are you afraid?" she asked. "Terrified," Ethan admitted. "I've been in combat before, but this is different. This isn't just my life on the line. It's all of you. If I make a mistake, if my tactics fail, people will die because of my choices. Again. You did not kill your soldiers at Tanar. You made an impossible choice, and some paid the price, but 412 others lived." She turned to face him fully. "You cannot save everyone, Ethan Cole. No one can, but you can choose to try. And that choice matters more than you know. I don't want to lose anyone else. Then we will fight very hard to ensure you do not." She reached out, traced the silvery marks on his arm. "These bind us. Your pain is our pain. Your victory is our victory. You are not alone in this, even when your mind tells you that you are." Ethan caught her hand, held it. "Thank you for finding me, for saving me back, for giving me a reason to be something other than a broken soldier hiding in the woods. You were never broken, just healing." She squeezed his hand. "And now you have a clan to heal with. We Elthara understand scars. We wear them with pride." The moment stretched between them, full of things neither of them knew how to say. Then an alarm blared across the valley, harsh and urgent. The corporate fleet had arrived, early, in force, and they weren't interested in negotiation. Ethan stood, Sarahna beside him. Around them, warriors moved into position with practiced efficiency. The matriarch's voice carried across the valley, speaking words Ethan didn't need translated to understand. Stand together, fight together, win together. He checked his rifle, the old reliable weapon that had been with him through everything. Sarahna drew her blade, the metal singing as it left its sheath. "Ready?" she asked. Ethan looked at the sky already filling with hostile ships. He thought about his soldiers at Tanar, about 3 years of hiding, about a wounded warrior he'd saved without thinking, about the choice he'd made and the family he'd found because of it. "Yeah," he said. "Let's show them what happens when you threaten someone's clan." Sarahna's grin was fierce and bright. "Now you truly speak like Elthara." The first plasma bolt screamed down from the heavens, and the Battle of Covran Valley began. The battle was nothing like the organized warfare Ethan remembered. It was chaos given form, plasma and blade and desperate gambles that somehow worked until they didn't. The corporate forces came in waves. Drop ships disgorged mercenaries by the dozen, heavily armed and well-coordinated. But they were fighting on terrain Ethan had studied for 3 years, against warriors who moved like the forest itself. "East Ridge now!" Ethan barked into the comm. A squad of Elthara warriors melted into the crimson trees, appearing moments later behind enemy lines. The mercenaries never knew what hit them. "West flank needs support," Sarahna called out. She was everywhere at once, her blade finding throats with terrible efficiency. Ethan had seen skilled fighters before. He'd never seen anyone fight like her. It was art and murder combined into something beautiful and horrifying. The old mining charges Ethan had placed throughout the valley did their work. Explosions rocked the earth, turning careful corporate advances into scattered retreats. But there were always more. Always another wave, another attack, another near miss that made Ethan's heart stop. "They're going for the artifact site," the matriarch's voice crackled over comm. If they activate it uncontrolled, the explosion will level half the continent. "I'm on it," Ethan said, already moving. Sirana appeared at his side, 3 other warriors falling in behind them. They moved as a unit, covering each other with the kind of trust that couldn't be taught, only earned. The artifact site was a crater in the valley floor, ancient stonework visible beneath centuries of soil. Corporate engineers were already working, their equipment humming with dangerous energy. Ethan counted 15 guards, all armed, all watching the perimeter. "We're outnumbered," one of the Elthara warriors observed. "We're always outnumbered," Ethan replied. "That's why we're better." They hit the guards from 3 directions simultaneously. Ethan's rifle spoke in short, controlled bursts. The Elthara were thunder and lightning made flesh. In 30 seconds, the guards were down, but the engineers had time to trigger something. The artifact began to glow with light that hurt to look at. The ground shook. Reality itself seemed to bend around the ancient doorway. "Shut it down," Ethan shouted, moving toward the controls. "Wait!" Sirana grabbed his arm. "The energy signature. If you touch it now, it will kill you." "Then what do we do?" She looked at him, and in her eyes he saw the same calculation he'd made at Tanar. The same impossible math of who lives and who dies, and how much are you willing to pay. "I can shield you," she said. "My armor has ancestral warding. It can absorb the energy long enough for you to disable the device." "How long?" "Long enough, perhaps. That's not exactly reassuring. It is the only option we have." She pulled something from her belt, a medallion that glowed with the same silvery light as the marks on his arm. "This is my family's sigil. If I do not survive, give it to my mother. Tell her I chose well." "You're not dying today. None of us choose when we die, Ethan Cole. We only choose how we live." She moved to the artifact, raised her arms, and her armor began to glow. "Now. Do it now." Ethan ran to the controls. The energy washed over him like fire, like ice, like nothing he'd ever felt. But Sarah Na was between him and the worst of it, her armor absorbing punishment that would have killed him in seconds. The controls were corporate standard, thank God. Ethan's fingers flew across the interface, shutting down systems, rerouting power, fighting the cascade that would turn the artifact into a bomb. Behind him, he could hear Sirana screaming, the sound raw and terrible. The device went dark. The energy dissipated. Ethan turned to find Sirana collapsed, her armor scorched black, smoke rising from joints and seams. "No," he said, dropping beside her. No, stay with me." Her eyes fluttered open. "Did we win?" "We won? We stopped them. But you need medical attention now. Always so worried about others." She coughed, and Ethan saw blood. "You should worry about yourself more." "Where's the fun in that?" She laughed, which turned into another cough. Ethan triggered his emergency beacon, called for healers, for help, for anything that could save her. The other warriors surrounded them, forming a protective circle. "You know," Sirana said quietly, "when I was sent to find you, I thought I was hunting a dangerous man. Instead, I found someone who saves even those who do not ask for it." She touched his face with a shaking hand. "Thank you, Ethan Cole, for reminding me what honor truly means. Save your strength. You're going to be fine." Such optimism. Very human. But her eyes were closing. Very foolish. Very kind. The healers arrived in a rush of motion and urgent voices. They pulled Ethan back, surrounded Sirani with equipment and expertise he couldn't match. He stood there, useless, watching them work. Above, the corporate forces were retreating. The Elthara had won the valley. But as Ethan looked at Sirana's still form, surrounded by frantic healers, he couldn't help but think about the cost of victory, about how many times he'd paid this price, about whether he was destined to lose everyone he tried to protect. The matriarch appeared beside him, her armor scored with battle damage, but her eyes sharp and clear. "She will live," the matriarch said. It wasn't a hope. It was a command to the universe itself. My daughter is strong, stronger than she knows, and she has reason to live now. You gave her that reason." Ethan didn't trust himself to speak. He just nodded and watched the healers work and prayed to gods he didn't believe in that just this once, the universe would let him save someone without losing someone else in return. Just this once, let the math work out in everyone's favor. Just this once. Sirana survived. 3 days in the medical tent, healers working around the clock, but she survived. Ethan barely left her side except when the matriarch ordered him to eat, sleep, or coordinate with the warriors still fortifying the valley. The corporate fleet had retreated but not departed. They hung in orbit like vultures, waiting for another opportunity. Intelligence suggested they were calling in reinforcements. The real battle was still coming. "You look terrible," Sirana said when she finally woke. Her voice was rough but strong. The burns on her face were already healing. Aelthara biology working miracles human medicine couldn't match. "You look pretty terrible yourself," Ethan replied, relief making his voice shake. "I saved you. You are welcome. I thought we agreed to save each other." "Then, we are even." She tried to sit up, winced. "Tell me what I missed." Ethan brought her up to date. The artifact was intact but dormant, sealed with Aelthara wards that would take a fleet's worth of firepower to break. The valley's defenses had held. Casualties were lighter than expected. But the corporate forces were regrouping, and this time they'd bring everything they had. "How long do we have?" Sarahana asked. 4 days, maybe 5. "Time enough." She looked at him with those amber eyes that saw too much. "You are afraid again. Why?" "Because last time I was in command of people, half of them died. Because I keep making choices that get others hurt. Because you almost died saving me, and I don't know how many more times I can watch that happen." "Then perhaps you should not watch." She took his hand. "Perhaps you should fight beside us instead of carrying all the weight alone. You are HFY now, guardian. But that does not mean solitary protector. It means you stand with us, not above us or apart from us." "I don't know how to do that." "Then learn. We have 4 days." She squeezed his hand. "And I am an excellent teacher." The next 4 days were a strange combination of preparation and peace. Ethan worked with the Aelthara warriors, learning their tactics, teaching them his. They learned to appreciate his creative approach to problem-solving. He learned to trust in their unshakable discipline. "This is called a joke," one warrior said, attempting human humor. "Why did the human cross the road?" "I don't know," Ethan said, trying not to smile. "Why?" "To get to the other side." The warrior looked pleased with herself. Was that correct? Technically, yes. Funny, not really. Humor is difficult to translate. Tell me about it. I've been trying to understand Aelthara humor for a week now. The warrior considered this. Perhaps some things are not meant to translate. Perhaps they are meant to be experienced together, in the moment, with those you trust. Ethan thought about that. About trust earned through shared danger. About belonging that came not from understanding everything, but from choosing to stand together despite not understanding. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. On the 4th day, the corporate fleet arrived. It was massive, overwhelming, the kind of force meant to break planets. Every ship bristled with weapons. Every soldier aboard was trained, equipped, and motivated by the promise of wealth beyond measure. The Aelthara looked at the fleet and began preparing their weapons with calm efficiency. Ethan looked at it and felt the old fear rise up, the fear that his tactics wouldn't be enough, that his choices would get everyone killed, that he was about to fail in the most spectacular way possible. The matriarch found him on the ridge overlooking the valley. "You are thinking too much, HFY. I'm thinking we're outnumbered 20-1. Numbers are not everything. We have the terrain. We have the motivation. We have you." She smiled. "And we have something they do not." "What's that?" "We have already won." At his confused look, she continued. They fight for profit, for objects they can sell. We fight for family, for a guardian who saved us without thinking of reward. Victory for them is measured in credits. Victory for us is measured in the people who survive to see tomorrow." She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You cannot lose a battle when your victory condition is simply to protect those you love. You can only choose how hard you make the enemy work for their defeat." Ethan looked at the valley below, at the warriors preparing positions, at Serana, recovered enough to stand, directing defenses with sharp efficiency, at the matriarch beside him, unshakable as stone. "All right," he said. "Then let's make them work for it." The matriarch's grin was fierce. "Now you speak like true Aelthera. Welcome to the clan, Ethan Cole. Now let us show these fools what happens when they threaten family." The fleet began its descent. Ethan checked his rifle one last time, the old friend that had been with him through everything. Beside him, the matriarch raised her blade to the sky, a challenge and a promise. The Battle of Covern Valley was about to begin in earnest. And this time, Ethan wasn't fighting alone. He was fighting with clan, with family, with people who would stand beside him not because they had to, but because they chose to. That made all the difference. The corporate fleet came down like the wrath of angry gods. Dropships by the hundred, heavy mechs that shook the earth with every step, artillery that turned the sky itself into fire. They weren't here to negotiate or capture. They were here to erase everything in their path. "North Ridge, concentrate fire," Ethan called out. Plasma bolts lanced upward, taking down 3 dropships before they could deploy. "East flank, fall back to secondary positions. West team, hit them from the trees." The Aelthara moved like parts of a single organism, each warrior trusting the plan, trusting each other, trusting him. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Serana fought at the front lines, her blade singing through the chaos. Every time Ethan thought she was overwhelmed, she'd emerge from smoke and fire with another enemy down. She'd catch his eye across the battlefield and grin, fierce and alive. "Having fun?" she called out during a brief lull. "This is your idea of fun? Better than drinking your terrible coffee." Despite everything, Ethan laughed. Maybe he was losing his mind. Maybe that was okay. The corporate commander made his appearance in a heavy battlesuit, more machine than man. His voice boomed across the valley, amplified to godlike proportions. "You cannot win. Surrender the artifact, and we will let you live." The matriarch stepped forward, blade in hand. "We have something more valuable than your artifact. We have honor. We have family. We have a human who taught us that mercy is not weakness." She raised her voice. "You have profit margins and fear. Tell me which will sustain you when the universe demands payment." The commander's laugh was mechanical and cold. "Honor doesn't pay for fleets. Surrender or be destroyed." "Third option," Ethan said, triggering the charges he'd spent 4 days placing. "We destroy you first." The valley floor erupted, not enough to kill the entire force, but enough to throw their formation into chaos. The Aelthera surged forward, turning disorder into rout. Ethan moved with them, his rifle finding targets with the same efficiency Serana's blade found throats. The commander, enraged, charged directly at Ethan. His battlesuit was armed with weapons that could level buildings. Ethan was one man with an antique rifle. The math was brutal and simple. "Move!" Serana shouted, throwing herself between them. The commander's plasma cannon fired, and she raised her ancestral shield, the one she'd used to save Ethan at the artifact site. The energy washed over her, around her, and she held firm. "You hide behind aliens?" the commander sneered. "Is that what humanity has come to?" "She's not hiding me," Ethan said, circling to the side. "She's giving me time to aim." He fired. Not at the commander, but at the power coupling visible on the suit's back. The shot was impossible, threading through chaos and smoke and the gap in the commander's armor. But Ethan had been making impossible shots his entire life. The suit's power died. The commander stumbled, suddenly carrying tons of dead metal. The Aelthera warriors closed in, blades ready. "Wait," Ethan called out. They paused, looking to him. Ethan approached the fallen commander, pulled him from the wreckage of his suit. The man was older than Ethan expected, scared in a way that expensive armor couldn't hide. "Go," Ethan said. "Tell your employers what happened here. Tell them that some things can't be bought, some people can't be broken, and some fights aren't worth the cost. They'll send more," the commander said. "They always send more." "Then we'll be here." Ethan looked at the Elthara surrounding him, at Serana standing tall despite her injuries, at the matriarch who had welcomed him as family. "And next time we'll be ready." The commander limped away. His remaining forces retreated with him, boarding their ships and fleeing into orbit. The Battle of Kovran Valley was over. The cost became clear in the aftermath. 37 Elthara wounded, 5 dead, their names sung into the wind by voices that carried grief and pride in equal measure. The valley was scarred by plasma fire and explosions. The ancient trees would take decades to regrow. But they had won. The artifact was safe. The clan was intact, and standing in the center of it all, exhausted and bloodied and somehow still alive, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt since Tanner. Pride. Not the arrogant kind that had gotten his soldiers killed, the quiet kind that came from standing with others and choosing to fight for something that mattered, for people who mattered, for a future worth protecting. Serana found him as the sun set, painting the ravaged valley in shades of crimson and gold. She said nothing, just stood beside him, her presence steady and sure. "Thank you," Ethan said finally. "For what?" "For finding me, for saving me, for giving me a reason to be something other than a ghost hiding in the woods. You were always more than that. You just needed to remember." She took his hand, and the blood marks on his arm glowed faintly in the dying light. "You are Ishvar now, guardian, bringer of warmth, the human who chose kindness when violence would have been easier, the man who taught warriors that mercy has more strength than any blade. I'm just a soldier who made some choices. You are a soldier who made the right choices, even when they cost you everything, even when no one thanked you for it, even when you stood alone." She squeezed his hand. "But you do not stand alone anymore." Around them, the Elthara were beginning the work of healing and rebuilding. They sang as they worked, songs of loss and victory, and the spaces in between. Ethan didn't understand the words, but he understood the meaning. They were home. They were family. They had survived. And tomorrow, they would do it all again if they had to. Together, always together. 3 months later, the valley barely resembled the battlefield it had been. The Elthara had rebuilt not just Ethan's cabin, but an entire settlement, blending their architecture with the crimson forest, in ways that made it hard to tell where nature ended and construction began. A temple rose at the valley's heart, honoring the 5 who had fallen and the alliance that had protected them all. Ethan stood at the temple's entrance, watching warriors train in the courtyard below. They moved with their usual deadly grace, but now some of them incorporated tactics he'd taught them. Human improvisation mixed with Elthara discipline, creating something neither culture had possessed alone. "They call it Ishvar style," Serana said, appearing beside him. She moved quietly these days, fully healed but with new scars that she wore like medals. "A fighting method that values creativity over tradition. Some of the elders complain, of course, but the warriors love it." "Of course they do. It lets them break rules and call it strategy." "You say that like it is a bad thing." She smiled. "The matriarch wishes to see you. Something about making your position official." Ethan followed her to the council chamber, a circular room carved from living stone. The matriarch sat at the center, surrounded by clan leaders whose names Ethan had finally learned to pronounce correctly. "Ishvar, oh," the matriarch said formally, "you have been with us 3 months. You have fought beside us, bled with us, taught us ways of thinking we had forgotten. The council has decided. We offer you permanent position as guardian of the Elthara. You would be our voice to other humans, our bridge between worlds. You would be family, formally and forever." Ethan looked around the room, at faces that had once been alien and were now familiar, at warriors who saluted him with genuine respect, at Serana, whose expression was carefully neutral, but whose eyes held hope. "I accept," he said, "on one condition." The matriarch raised an eyebrow. "You negotiate with your own adoption. I want to rebuild my old cabin, keep it as it was, a reminder of where I came from, who I was before all this." "Why?" one of the elders asked. "Why honor your isolation?" "Because I need to remember what loneliness felt like, so I never take this for granted." Ethan gestured at the assembled clan. "So I always remember that belonging is a choice, and I choose this, every day, not because I have to, because I want to." The matriarch smiled, warm and approving. "Then it will be done. Your cabin will stand as monument to the man who chose kindness in the darkness, who chose family over isolation, who taught us that strength comes not from standing alone, but from knowing when to reach out." The ceremony that followed was more elaborate than Ethan expected. Songs and languages he still didn't fully understand. Marks painted on his skin in patterns that meant guardian, protector, bridge builder. And finally, the matriarch presented him with a bracelet forged from the metal of Serana's ancestral armor, etched with symbols that told the story of how he'd found his way home. "This is not a gift," the matriarch said. "It is a promise that you will always have place among us, that our battles are your battles, our joys your joys, our losses your losses. You are Elthera now, Ethan Cole, as much as any warrior born to our world." Ethan tried to speak, found his throat too tight. He settled for a nod, hoping they understood. That evening he sat with Serana by a fire outside his rebuilt cabin. The original structure, simple and solitary, but now surrounded by the sounds of a living community, children playing, warriors laughing, the ordinary noise of people who belong together. "Do you regret it?" Serana asked, "saving me that night?" "Every day," Ethan said. At her shocked look, he smiled. "I regret that I didn't find you sooner, that I wasted 3 years hiding when I could have been here with you." She was quiet for a moment. Then she took his hand, traced the silvery marks that bound them. "Among my people, these marks mean many things: protection, alliance, family. But they can also mean something else, something deeper, if both parties choose it." "What's that?" "Partnership, the kind that lasts beyond battle and bloodshed, the kind that builds rather than destroys." She met his eyes. "I would choose that, Ethan Cole, if you would choose it too." Ethan thought about everything he'd lost, every mistake he'd made, every person he'd failed to save. Then he thought about everything he'd found: this valley, this clan, this woman who had seen him at his worst and chosen to stand beside him anyway. "I choose it," he said. "Every time, in every universe, I choose you." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Around them, the settlement settled into evening rhythms. Somewhere, a corporate board was probably planning another assault. Somewhere, new threats were emerging. But here, in this moment, there was peace. "You know," Serana said, breaking the silence, "you still make terrible coffee. And you still insult it while drinking it." "Perhaps some traditions are worth maintaining." Ethan laughed, and the sound was light and genuine. 3 months ago he'd been a broken soldier hiding from his past. Now he was guardian, teacher, friend, and something more. He'd learned that mercy wasn't weakness, that choosing to care was the bravest thing anyone could do, and that family wasn't something you were born into, but something you built through shared choices and stubborn hope. The stars above were bright and clear, uncounted worlds spinning in the darkness. Each one held people making choices for good or ill. Each one held potential for kindness or cruelty, connection or isolation. Ethan Cole had made his choice. He'd chosen to save a wounded stranger, to stand with warriors who became family, to believe that decency mattered in a universe that often forgot to care. And in choosing that, he'd found something he'd thought lost forever. He'd found home. The fire burned low. The night grew cold, but Ethan sat with Serena, surrounded by the sounds of his clan, and felt warm in ways that had nothing to do with the flames. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, new battles to fight, and losses to mourn. But tomorrow would also bring this, the simple peace of belonging, of being known and choosing to stay anyway. That was enough. That was everything. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, the universe watched a soldier and a warrior share silence beside dying embers. And perhaps it smiled. Because for all its cruelty and chaos, sometimes the universe remembered to reward those who chose kindness. Sometimes, just sometimes, the broken found their way home. And when they did, they found they'd been building that home all along, one impossible choice at a time. In the end, Ethan's journey teaches a quiet truth. Sometimes the most dangerous force in the universe isn't power or fleets or ancient artifacts, but a single human choosing compassion when everything else demands violence. Because kindness, inconvenient and stubborn as it is, tends to echo farther than war ever could. And now the real questions begin. What do you protect when no one is watching? Which choices in your life were small on the outside, but shifted entire worlds inside you? And if loyalty is not defined by blood or species, what does family actually mean to you? If you stayed with us through this entire cosmic mess of battles, scars, and terrible coffee, write the word clan in the comments so we know you walked every step of this journey. Tell us your city, Earth, Mars, or somewhere in between, and join this strange little community across the stars. Hit subscribe, drop a like, hype this story, share it with someone who needs a reminder that mercy can be louder than fear, and check out the next video appearing on your screen, because every ending here is just an invitation to another impossible human choice.